by Eric Holder, who is the former Attorney General of the United States. It's a great pleasure to have you on, sir. We had booked you this evening to talk about the incredible surprise of the Supreme Court, which upheld a big part of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, threw out a congressional redistricting by the state of Alabama, something you've been very invested in. But you are also the former Attorney General of the United States. I can't imagine anyone who would have more insight into what is going on inside that building, inside the minds of Jack Smith and Merrick Garland on a night like tonight.
Well, it's interesting. I think that, finding out what's going on now would be interesting, but I think probably more interesting is what happened in the days and weeks that have preceded this evening. There has clearly been a determination made that there is a basis to bring charges against a former president of the United States. And I think people need to pause. This is Donald Trump, and he's different, and he's, not like anyone else. But for the first time in the history of this country, a former president of the United States has been indicted on federal charges. But something I also want to make clear, we should not in any way denigrate or devalue what happened in Manhattan. That was a serious charge. That is a serious charge, and was consequential as well. I think ultimately there are likely to be 4 indictments, including the 2 that we now know about. I think there are probably 2 additional ones. And this is something that for me was expected, but is nevertheless in a whole bunch of ways really kind of breathtaking. All the media reports, in fact, were accurate. I've known Jack Smith for a good number of years. He's a serious, sober-minded prosecutor who is not going to be deterred by anything that Donald Trump throws at him. Merrick Garland, I've known probably 25, 30 years. He's equally not going to be perturbed, disturbed, or moved by that which Donald Trump throws at him. Mr. Trump is now in waters that are uncharted for him. There may be attempts at delays, but the federal court system handles, those kinds of attempts. And this is a matter that will ultimately be put before a jury, unless he decides he wants to try to cut some kind of a deal.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because again, he is legally presumed innocent under our system of justice in the courtroom, although American citizens are allowed to form opinions on public matters in whatever way they choose. My general sense, the way this usually goes down, I remember, former Clinton advisor Sandy Berger, quite famously had gone to an archive. He had walked out with some documents which he had sort of stuck in his clothing. He didn't take that to trial, if I recall correctly. He pleaded that out. And my sort of strong suspicion is the way the Department of Justice operates, the facts as reported so far, is that were this just a lieutenant in the Air Force or someone who worked in the government who was a contractor, there would probably be a strong impetus to try to cut a deal and to plea, right?
Yeah, I suspect so. Given the strength of the case as I know it, I suspect there would be a real attempt on the part of the defense to try to cut a deal such that you would minimize the amount of time that the defendant would serve in jail, the amount of money that he might have to pay. You would try to minimize the punishment. Donald Trump is a different kind of bird. He will undoubtedly try to, portray this as the deep state getting after him. He will somehow try to tie it to Democrats' attempt to deny him the nomination and ultimately, the presidency once again. But I think people have, I'm not a political pundit, but I think people have underestimated how the American people are going to view this indictment and then others that are to follow, including the one in Manhattan that has already been returned. Yeah, how they're going to view the totality of these charges against Mr. Trump and the impact that it's going to have on his political fortunes.